You're a Han Dynasty soldier, middle of the night. The temperature is minus 50 degrees Celsius and the wind is moving fast enough to strip hair from a horse. Your square military tent collapsed 2 hours ago. The wood snapped, the fabric tore, and right now, 50 meters away, a Xiongnu nomad is sleeping warm inside a round felt dome that hasn't moved an inch. Same storm, same frozen ground, completely different outcome. We're going to take that dome apart, layer by layer, and show you exactly why it worked and why the greatest empire on Earth had to borrow it from the people they were trying to conquer. For a long time, the yurt has been called a simple tent, something primitive, something nomads used because they had nothing better. Modern testing says otherwise. The felt walls of a traditional yurt insulate better than the eco-boards sold in hardware stores today. The dome shape pushes wind pressure downward, anchoring the structure harder into the ground as the storm gets worse. The clay hearth at the center stores heat and releases it slowly, for 6 to 8 hours after the fire dies. And a silk lining on the interior wall bounces body heat back into the room, the same way paramedic foil blankets work today. This was a portable thermal system, built by people who had no margin for error. The Han generals who marched into Xiongnu territory during the wars of 133 BC learned this the hard way. An official named Xiongnu sent a warning directly to the emperor. Troops couldn't carry enough winter fuel and animals were dying in the cold before the enemy even arrived. The steppe climate was killing more men than Xiongnu arrows. So the Han made a smart decision. They stopped trying to solve the problem with Chinese tools. They studied the people who had already solved it. They adopted the Qiong Lu, the Nomad Dome, and used it across the Silk Road. We've pulled from Han Dynasty records, modern physics studies, and field archaeology to break this system into 7 layers. By the end, you'll know exactly how a human body stayed alive at minus 50 degrees Celsius, with no electricity, no synthetic materials, and no supply chain. Let's start with the shape. 2 tents, same storm, same frozen ground. One tears apart, one holds. What's the difference? Shape. A square tent has flat walls. Wind hits a flat wall and transfers its full force into it. On the other side, a low pressure zone forms, and that zone pulls warm air out through every seam and stitch in the fabric. The harder the wind blows, the faster your heat disappears. At minus 50 degrees Celsius, your shelter stops protecting you. It starts emptying you. The Qiong Lu works differently. The wall is circular, a collapsible wooden grid called the kana. Long wooden rafters rest on top of it and lean inward, slotting into a central ring at the crown. The whole shape is low, rounded and smooth. Wind doesn't hit it, it slides around it, the way water moves around a stone in a river. Here's where it gets interesting. As wind speed increases, the pressure on the dome pushes downward and inward. The structure gets pressed harder into the ground. Modern tests show traditionally built yurts holding steady in winds near 100 kilometers per hour. Purpose-built versions handle considerably more. Picture a Han commander watching his rectangular tent shred apart in a steppe gale. Poles snapping, fabric tearing, everything inside exposed to open air. 50 meters away, the Xiongnu camp sits completely still, smoke curling gently from the roof holes, not a rope out of place. That image alone explains why the Han changed course. You don't need a physics lecture when the answer is right in front of you. Round shapes look softer than square ones. On the open steppe, they're stronger. The worse the storm gets, the harder the wind holds the dome to the earth. But shape only handles the wind outside. It doesn't stop minus 50 degrees Celsius cold from moving through the walls. For that, they needed a skin, and the one they chose still outperforms modern materials today. When most people think of ancient insulation, they picture animal hides. Rough, heavy, basic, useful, but nothing close to what we build with today. That picture is wrong. The felt used in yurt walls is not woven. It's pressed. Wool fibres are matted and locked together under heat and pressure. The result is a dense, tangled structure with no straight paths for air to move through. Trapped inside are millions of tiny pockets of still air. Still air doesn't move. It doesn't carry heat away, it just sits there, holding warmth in place. Compact wool felt measures between 0.03 and 0.04 watts per metre Kelvin in thermal conductivity. The wood fibre insulation boards sold in eco-home stores today measure around 0.06. The ancient felt is measurably better. Not close, better. Traditional yurt walls stack 2 to 5 centimetres of felt, sometimes with a water-resistant outer layer. That combination, with a central fire and several bodies sleeping close together, can hold a temperature gap of 40 to 50 degrees Celsius between inside and outside. At minus 50 degrees Celsius outside, the interior won't be warm by modern standards. But it will be above frostbite range. Fingers work, feet work, you wake up functional. On the steppe, that's everything. Nomad surveys across Eastern Central Asia show this design has stayed almost unchanged for thousands of years. Same felt walls, same circular plan, same central hearth. Generations of nomads had every chance to improve it. They didn't, because it already did the job. A material made by hand from sheep wool on the open steppe outperforms some of what's sold in hardware stores today. The older design won. The felt holds the heat in, but heat has to come from somewhere, and on a treeless plain that runs to the horizon in every direction, there's nothing obvious to burn, unless you know where to look. The steppe has almost no trees, no forests, no coal a travelling army could reach, no supply wagons carrying firewood across 1,000 miles of frozen grass. Xiongnu's warning to the emperor was clear. Troops couldn't carry enough fuel. Animals were dying. The cold was winning. The Xiongnu had already solved this. The solution had been walking beside them the whole time. Dried animal dung, called Argul, is compressed grass energy. Herbivores eat grass, partially break it down, and produce waste that, once dried in the sun, burns. It lights slower than wood. That sounds like a problem. It isn't. Wood fires burn hot and fast. Sharp peak, then a fast drop. Managing a wood fire through a 14-hour winter night means waking up every few hours to feed it. The fire runs your sleep schedule. Argul burns low and steady. No spikes, no sudden drops. Experimental burns show dung embers holding around 300 degrees Celsius. Enough for cooking, enough to heat a clay stove. But the real value isn't the temperature, it's the consistency. Load the stove at midnight, sleep until dawn, wake up warm. Ethnographic studies confirm dung was the primary fuel for steppe nomads across centuries. Entire camps ran on it, cooking, heating, drying wet gear after a river crossing. The herds weren't just food and transport, they were a fuel supply that renewed itself every single day. Burning dung sounds like desperation. On the steppe, it was the smart choice. Available everywhere, free and perfectly matched to the heating system at the centre of the tent. That system is where the real engineering lives. A steady fire is useful, but a fire in an open pit sends most of its heat straight up and out. To make that gentle burn last all night, they needed something that could catch the heat and hold it. That's where the clay comes in. Think about an open campfire, flames high, heat intense near the fire, but most of that energy rises straight up with the hot gases and disappears into the sky. An open fire looks powerful. Most of what it produces is wasted. The hearth at the centre of a Qiong Lu worked on a different idea entirely. Heavy clay and stone stoves sat at the centre of the tent, sometimes with a metal outer layer. These materials absorb heat slowly, the way a thick brick wall soaks up afternoon sun. While the Argul burns, the clay and stone are filling up with energy, storing it. And then, after the fire dies, they give it back. They release it as infrared heat, invisible warmth that travels outward from the stove surface and warms whatever it touches directly. Your skin, your clothing, the felt walls, the bodies sleeping nearby. Infrared doesn't need to heat the air first. It moves straight to solid surfaces, which is why you can feel warmth from a stove across a cold room. A well-built clay stove keeps 85 to 95% of its heat inside the tent. An open fire keeps as little as 10 to 30%. That gap is the difference between a heating system and a heat disposal system. The stones charge during the evening meal, then they radiate for 6 to 8 hours. Add the felt walls holding warmth in and several bodies sleeping close together, and the interior stays above -10 degrees Celsius when it's -50 degrees Celsius outside. Nobody tends the fire through the night. The stove does the work while the soldiers sleep. The Chinese Qiong, the heated brick bed platform used in northern Chinese homes for centuries, runs on the same principle. Store heat in mass. Release it slowly as infrared. Sleep warm. The Steppe version was portable. The physics were identical. A plain clay stove looks like nothing. The less impressive it looks, the better it works. The tent is warm, the stove is radiating, but the human body has its own fuel requirements, and in deep cold, when that fuel runs out, no tent and no stove can save you. Cold survival is a calorie problem before it's anything else. At -50 degrees Celsius, your body runs a continuous heating operation just to stay alive. Shivering alone burns around 400 calories per hour. A soldier working and moving in deep winter needs between 3,000 and 5,000 calories a day. Fall short of that, and the body starts rationing. Blood pulls away from the hands and feet to protect the core. Fingers stop working. Judgment goes. The body cools from the inside, and no external heat source fully compensates for an empty stomach. The nomads understood this without a nutrition textbook. They turned every part of every animal into preserved, high-calorie food. The most efficient of those foods was blood sausage. A 2024 analysis of Bronze Age cooking vessels from the Eurasian steppe found residues from blood sausages and dairy processing, including yak milk. This wasn't occasional, it was systematic. A complete high-fat, high-protein food system built specifically for cold survival. The evidence is sitting in the residue of 3,000-year-old pots. Fat delivers 9 calories per gram, more than double what carbohydrates or protein provide. Blood carries iron, which keeps oxygen moving through the body efficiently in cold and at altitude. Together, they support something called non-shivering thermogenesis, the body generating heat directly from fat without shivering. The body runs its own furnace. The food is the fuel. Chinese frontier armies adopted these food practices. The same vessel evidence that shows blood sausage shows yak dairy alongside it. A complete system. Every part of the animal had a thermal purpose. We think of shelter as the first line of defense against cold. The nomads knew food came first. The best-built dome on the steppe cannot save a body that has run out of fuel. The blood sausage was survival engineering, just worn on the inside. The body is warm, the stove is radiating, the food is working, but all of that heat rises straight to the top of the dome. If it escapes through the roof, the whole system drains in minutes. The nomads solved this with a single wooden ring and nothing else holding it together. Hot air rises. Every heated space with an opening at the top faces the same problem. The warmth your body produces, the heat from the clay stove, the warmth held in the felt walls, all of it moves upward. If the top leaks, warm air escapes and pulls cold air in at floor level. The tent becomes a chimney. The harder the wind blows, the faster the heat drains. The Qiong Lu has a smoke hole at the crown. Without a fix, it would do exactly that. The fix is the tonneau, a heavy wooden ring at the peak of the dome. Every rafter slots into it from below. The weight of the felt layers presses down on the rafters, which press into the ring. Tension bands wrap the outside of the dome and pull everything inward. The whole structure holds together through weight and pressure. No nails, no bolts, nothing. Here's what happens when the storm hits. Wind presses the outer felt more firmly against the rafters and into the ring. The small gaps where warm air might escape get pressed shut. A felt flap over the smoke hole adjusts for ventilation, open during cooking, closed at night. The harder the wind blows, the tighter the seal becomes. The storm is the fastener. A soldier sleeping below doesn't think about any of this. He just notices that when the blizzard gets louder, the tent feels warmer. That's good engineering. It works without anyone understanding it. Modern buildings use bolts, brackets, and adhesives to hold joints together under load. This system uses gravity and wind pressure, and the joint gets stronger under stress, not weaker. For the common soldier, these 6 layers were enough. Survive the night, wake up, do it again. But on the Silk Road, wealthy traders and senior commanders needed more than survival. They needed to work, negotiate, and sleep well. For that, there was one more layer, one that works on the same principle as the foil blankets paramedics use at accident scenes today. Silk is known for being expensive, soft, a status material. What it's less known for is what it does to heat. And that's exactly why elite Silk Road traders and Tang Dynasty commanders lined the inside of their Qiong Lu with it. Silk is a protein fibre. Its smooth surface interacts with infrared heat, the invisible warmth radiating from your body and from the clay stove, in a way that rough wool or cotton does not. Recent material science work has confirmed that silk responds to near-infrared energy in ways that make it genuinely useful as a thermal fabric. This wasn't a laboratory discovery, it was something people noticed over generations. Silk-lined rooms felt warmer, so they kept using silk. A thin inner layer of silk does 3 things at once. It smooths the interior wall, which cuts the small drafts that move along rough felt. It adds another pocket of still air between the silk and the felt behind it, another layer of insulation. And it reflects a portion of the infrared heat from the occupants back toward the center of the room. Together, these effects can make the interior feel around 10 degrees warmer. This wasn't for every soldier. Silk was expensive. The frontier army ran on felt and clay. But for a senior officer or a Silk Road merchant, a silk-lined Qiong Lu was a different experience entirely. Han Dynasty records describe envoys entering Xiongnu yurts as entering an inner circle of power. These weren't bare survival spaces. They were warm, lined rooms where alliances were made and trade deals were written. The silk was part of what made that possible. NASA's emergency foil blankets work by reflecting infrared radiation back to the body, bounce the heat back instead of letting it escape. Silk Road traders were using the same idea over 1,000 years before the space program existed, not from a formula, but from paying attention to what worked. The elite Qiong Lu was the same dome, the same felt, the same clay stove. One extra layer turned a shelter into a place you could actually live well. The Qiong Lu was never a Chinese invention, and that's exactly what makes it worth studying. Han and Tang generals looked at the nomads who were surviving conditions that were killing their own troops, and they made the practical choice. They learned. They adopted a dome that holds tighter in a storm, felt that outperforms modern insulation, dung that burns steady through a 14-hour night, clay that stores heat like a battery, food that runs the body's own furnace, a gravity seal with no bolts, and a silk lining that bounces heat back like a foil blanket. 7 layers, each one solving a specific problem. Together, they kept people alive and functional at -50 degrees Celsius, with no electricity, no synthetics, and no supply chain. 2,000 years later, families are still living in these domes on the same frozen steppe. because the physics haven't changed. On Silk Road Diaries, this is what we do every week. Find the quiet, practical engineering that kept people alive and trace it forward into the world we live in now. If that's the kind of story you want more of, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next chapter.